Which of the following types of tissue is responsible for covering body surfaces, lining body cavities, and forming glands? Muscle tissues, connective tissues, epithelial tissues, nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue forms covering and linings. It is also the tissue that makes up glands, glandular epithelium. A student observes a tissue sample under a microscope. The cells are elongated, contain multiple nuclei at the periphery, and have obvious striation. What type of tissue is this? Smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle, dense regular connective tissue. Skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle cells are long, cylindric, multinucleated, nuclei at periphery, and striated. They are under voluntary control. Which of the following epithelial tissue types is best suited for rapid diffusion, such as the alveoli of lungs? Simple squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. Simple squamous epithelium. Simple squamous epithelium is a single layer of flat cells allowing for rapid diffusion and filtration found in alveoli, kidney, and capillary walls. What is the primary function of neuroglia? Glial cells in nervous tissue transmit electrical impulse, support and protect neurons, contract to produce movement, store energy reserves. Support and protect neurons. Neuroglia are the supporting cells of nervous tissue. Neurons transmit impulses. Glia cells provide support, insulation, and nutrients. The extracellular matrix is a key characteristic of which major tissue type? Epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, connective tissue, nervous tissue. Connective tissue. Connective tissue is characterized by having cells scattered with an extracellular matrix, ground substances plus fibers. This distinguishes it from other tissue. Which type of connective tissue stores energy in the form of fat, insulates the body and provides cushioning? Areolar tissue, adipose tissue, reticular tissue, dense regular connective tissue. Adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is specialized for fat storage, energy reserve, insulation, thermoregulation, and cushioning protection of organs. The tissue lining the small intestine contains goblet cells. What is the primary function of these cells? Absorption of nutrients, secretion of mucus, propulsion of food, protection against abrasion. Secretion of mucus. Goblet cells are unicellular exocrine glands found within columnar epithelial linings. They secrete mucus and lubricate and protect the surface. Cardiac muscle tissue is unique because it possesses spindle-shaped cells with no striation, intercalated discs, and is involuntarily controlled, multiple nuclei per cell and voluntarily controlled, a single nucleus, and is found in blood vessel walls. Intercalated discs and is involuntarily controlled. Cardiac muscle is striated like skeletal muscle but is involuntary. Its unique features include branching cells connected and intercalated discs, gap junctions. Which of the following tissue types is avascular, lack blood vessel, and receives nutrients through diffusion? Dense connective tissue, epithelial tissue, smooth muscle tissue, nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue are avascular. They rely on diffusion from underlying connective tissue for oxygen and nutrients. A biopsy of a tendon reveals densely packed collagen fibers running in parallel. This describes dense regular connective tissue, elastic connective tissue, dense regular connective tissue, hyaline cartilage. Dense regular connective tissue. Tendons and ligaments are classic examples. Fibers, mostly collagen, are densely packed and parallel, providing great strength in one direction. Which epithelial tissue type appears stratified but actually contains of a single layer of cells and often contains cilia? transitional epithelium, simple cuboidal epithelium, pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium, stratified columnar epithelium. Pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. All cells touch the basement membrane, but nuclei are at different heights, giving a stratified appearance, often ciliated. Example, tracheal lining. The skin's ability to withstand friction and protect against pathogen is primarily due to which tissue? Simple squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, reticular connective tissue. Stratified squamous epithelium. The epidermis of the skin is keratinized. Stratified squamous epithelium. Multiple layers provide protection. Keratin adds toughness and waterproofing. Which tissue types forms a supportive framework for lymphatic organs like the spleen and lymph nodes? Adipose tissue, elastic cartilage, reticular connective tissue, fibrocartilage. Reticular connective tissue. Reticular connective tissue forms a delicate internal stroma or framework that supports the functional cells of lymphatic organs. What is the main function of simple columnar epithelium? Protection against abrasion, secretion and absorption, rapid diffusion, stretching. Secretion and absorption. Simple columnar epithelium lines the digestive tract, stomach and rectum. Its tall cells provide ample cytoplasm for secretion. The cells provide ample cytoplasm for secretion, enzymes, mucus, and absorption. Osteocytes are mature bone cells found in small cavities called lacunae. Which tissue type do they belong to? Nervous tissue, epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue. Connective tissue. Bone is connective tissue. The cells osteocytes, osteoblasts, osteoclasts are surrounded by a hard calcified matrix rich in collagen fibers. The pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium is found lining the small intestine, trachea and bronchi, urinary bladder, blood vessel. Trachea and bronchi. This epithelium lines much of the respiratory tract. Cilia move mucus and trap particles upward, appears stratified, but all cells touch basement membrane. What is the primary function of simple squamous epithelium? Protection from abrasion, secretion and absorption, rapid diffusion and filtration, stretching. Rapid diffusion and filtration. Simple squamous epithelium consists of a single layer of flat cells allowing efficient diffusion, lungs, capillaries, and filtration, kidneys. Which tissue types forms the lining of blood vessel, endothelium, and air sacs of lungs? Simple cuboidal epithelium, simple squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium, pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. Simple squamous epithelium. Endothelium blood vessel lining and mesothelium body cavity lining are specialized forms of simple squamous epithelium. What unique cellular structures allow cardiac muscle cells to contract as a unit? Sarcomeres, dendrites, intercalated discs, myofilaments. Intercalated discs. Intercalated discs contain gap junction and desmosomes that allow cardiac muscle cells to communicate and contract synchronously. Which type of connective tissue provides flexibility and support in the external ear and epiglottis? Hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, elastic cartilage, bone. Elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage contains elastic fibers providing flexibility and resilience found in external ear and epiglottis. Goblet cells which secrete mucus are commonly found in what type of epithelial tissue? Simple squamous, stratified squamous, simple columnar, transitional. Simple columnar. Goblet cells are mucus-secreting unicellular glands found in simple columnar epithelium of digestive and respiratory tracts. A biopsy shows a tissue with cells tightly packed together arranged in layers with no visible blood vessels. This describes connective tissue, muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is characterized by closely packed cells with extracellular matrix arranged in sheets and avascular. Which tissue has the greatest ability to regenerate? Cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle, nervous tissue, epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue has high regenerative capacity due to stem cells in the basal layer. Other tissue regenerated poorly or not at all. What type of tissue forms tendons and ligaments? Dense irregular connective tissue, dense regular connective tissue, irregular connective tissue, reticular connective tissue. Dense regular connective tissues. Tendons, muscle to bone, and ligaments, bone to bone, and composed of parallel collagen fibers for great tensile strength in one direction. The pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium is found lining the small intestine, trachea and bronchi, urinary bladder, blood vessel. Trachea and bronchi. This epithelium lines much of the respiratory tract. Cilia move mucus and trap particles upward, appears stratified, but all cells touch basement membrane. Which muscle type is involuntary and found in the walls of hollow organs? Skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, striated muscle. Smooth muscles. Smooth muscle is involuntary, non-striated, and found in walls of hollow organs, digestive tract, blood vessel, uterus. The transitional epithelium is unique because it has ciliated on its surface, can stretch and recoil, contains goblet cells. Is it found in the respiratory tract? Can stretch and recoil. Transitional epithelium found in urinary bladders, uterus, urethra, can stretch when full and recoil when empty without damage. Which connective tissue stores fat, provide insulation and cushions organs? Dense connective tissue, cartilage, bone, adipose tissue. Adipose tissue. Adipose tissue stores triglycerides for energy, provides thermal insulation and cushions protections organs, example around kidneys. Which tissue type covers body surface and lines cavities? Connective, epithelial, muscle, nervous. Epithelial. Epithelial tissue forms protective layer on surface and lines organs and cavities, is also function in absorption and secretion. Which tissue type is responsible for transmitting electrical impulse? Muscle, nervous, connective, epithelial. Nervous. Nervous tissue contains neurons that transmit electrical signals throughout the body. Which of the following is not a type of connective tissue? Bone, blood, cartilage, smooth muscle. Smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is a type of muscle tissue, not connective tissue. Which muscle tissue is voluntary and striated? Cardiac, smooth, skeletal, connective. Skeletal. Skeletal muscle is voluntary and has striation for contraction. Which tissue stores fat and provides insulation? Cartilage, adipose, epithelial, nervous. Adipose. Adipose tissue is a type of connective tissue that stores fat and cushions organs. Which tissue type has cells that are tightly packed with little extracellular matrix? Connective, epithelial, muscle, nervous. Epithelial. Epithelial tissue cells are closely packed to form protective barriers. Which muscle tissue is found in the walls of hollow organs like the intestine? Skeletal, cardiac, smooth, connective. Smooth. Smooth muscle is involuntary and found in organs such as the stomach and intestine. Which tissue type provides structural support and binds other tissue together? Nervous, connective, epithelial, muscle. Connective. Connective tissue includes bone, cartilage, and blood, which support and connect body structure. Which tissue type forms glands? Connective, epithelial, muscle, nervous. Epithelial. Glands are formed from epithelial tissues specialized for secretion. Which tissue type is responsible for movement? Nervous, muscle, connective, epithelial. Muscle. Muscle tissue contracts to produce movement. Which connective tissue transport oxygen and nutrients? Bone, blood, cartilage, adipose. Blood. Blood is fluid connective tissue that transports substances throughout the body. Which muscle tissue is striated and involuntary? Skeletal, cardiac, smooth, connective. Cardiac. Cardiac muscle is striated like skeletal muscle, but involuntary, found only in the heart. Which tissue type has the fastest regeneration rate? Nervous, muscle, epithelial, connective. Epithelial. Epithelial tissue regenerates quickly due to its protective role. Which connective tissue cushions joints? Bone, cartilage, adipose, blood. Cartilage. Cartilage provides cushioning and flexibility at joints. Which tissue type contains intercalated discs? Skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, nervous tissue. Cardiac muscle. Intercalated discs allow synchronized contraction of cardiac muscle. Which tissue type lines the respiratory tract? Connective, epithelial, muscle, nervous. Epithelial. Respiratory tract lining is epithelial tissue specialized for secretion and protection. Which tissue type stores calcium and provides structural support? Cartilage, bone, adipose, blood. Bone. Bone tissue stores calcium and supports body structure. Which tissue type is found in the brain and spinal cord? Muscle, nervous, connective, epithelial. Nervous. Nervous tissue forms the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. Which tissue type helps maintain body temperature? Adipose, cartilage, bone, blood. Adipose. Adipose tissue insulates the body and helps regulate temperature. Which tissue type has the least ability to regenerate? Nervous, epithelial, muscle, connective. Nervous. Nervous tissue regenerates poorly compared to epithelial and connective tissue. Which muscle tissue is multinucleated? Skeletal, cardiac, smooth, connective. Skeletal. Skeletal muscle fibers have multiple nuclei per cell. Which tissue types forms tendons and ligaments? Cartilage, dense connective tissue, adipose, epithelial. Dense connective tissue. Tendons and ligaments are made of dense connective tissue for strength. Which tissue types line blood vessel? Connective, epithelial, muscle, nervous. Epithelial. Epithelial tissue lines blood vessels. Which tissue type contains actin and myosin filaments? Muscle, nervous, connective, epithelial. Muscle. Muscle tissue contains actin and myosin for contraction. Which tissue type is specialized for absorption in the intestine? Connective, epithelial, muscle, nervous. Epithelial. Intestinal lining is epithelial tissue adapted for absorption.